Right, buckle up because we've got some absolutely devastating news for the Labour government, and this time it's not just political spin or opposition rhetoric. We're talking about sophisticated, peer-reviewed scientific research that's basically demolished Keir Starmer's flagship immigration policy, Labour's controversial one out migrant scheme, which was supposed to be the humane, effective alternative to the Conservatives' Rwanda plan, has been revealed as an absolute failure. According to advanced modelling published in a peer-reviewed journal, Labour's scheme has reduced channel crossings by a pitiful 9% since it was announced. 9%. Meanwhile, the Rwanda scheme that Labour scrapped, the one they called expensive, inhumane and unworkable, appears to have been significantly more effective as a deterrent. Arrivals have risen by 24% more than projected after Labour cancelled the Rwanda policy following their election victory. So Labour scrapped something that was actually working and replaced it with something that barely works at all. And here's the kicker that should make every Labour MP squirm. Since the one in, one out deal was announced, about 16,000 illegal immigrants have arrived in the UK, and only about 100 have been sent back. That means illegal channel migrants have a 99.5% chance of staying in the UK. That's not a deterrent. That's practically an open invitation. So how has Starmer managed to make the migrant crisis worse? Let's dive into this catastrophic policy failure. Quick favour before we get stuck into this absolute disaster. If you're watching this thinking, how did Labour get this so spectacularly wrong? Then hit that subscribe button right now. Over 92% of you haven't done it yet. It's completely free, takes 2 seconds and helps us keep covering these stories. Cheers if you did. Right, let's talk about Labour's failing immigration policy. So let's start with the research itself, because this isn't some dodgy think tank producing politically motivated numbers. This is peer-reviewed scientific research using sophisticated modelling techniques published in an academic journal. The study was conducted by data scientist Dr. Richard Wood, whose model has previously proved highly accurate in forecasting migrant crossings. This isn't his first rodeo. His predictions have been remarkably close to actual figures, which gives his current analysis serious credibility. The model he's created predicts the daily number of small boat migrant arrivals based on a comprehensive range of factors: weather conditions, sea state, the scale of illegal immigration across Europe, asylum refusals, cross-channel deaths, returns agreements, and various deterrent schemes. It's a sophisticated piece of work that takes into account dozens of variables to produce accurate forecasts. And what has this model revealed? Well, it's projected that by the end of this year, we'll see approximately 45,651 crossings. That's closely tracking 2022's trajectory, with just over 39,000 migrants having reached the UK so far this year. So we're on course for one of the worst years on record for channel crossings. And this is happening under Labour's watch after they promised they'd be tougher and more effective than the Conservatives on immigration. The model also analysed the impact of various deterrent schemes over time, and the results are fascinating. Migrant arrivals are 41% higher since repealing the Dublin III regulation. They're 36% lower since introducing the 2022 Albania Returns Agreement. Both of those findings are statistically significant, which means they're not just random variation, they're actual effects caused by the policies. Now, let's look specifically at Labour's one in, one out scheme. This policy, which Labour has been championing as their solution to the channel crossings crisis, involves returning channel migrants to France. The idea is that for every migrant who arrives illegally, one gets sent back, creating a deterrent effect that discourages people from attempting the crossing in the first place. Sounds reasonable in theory, but in practice, according to Dr. Wood's model, this scheme has reduced migrant arrivals by just 8.8% since it was announced on July 10th up to October 31st. Not even 9%, really. And here's the kicker that should worry Labour. Dr. Wood cautioned that this decline was within the expected variation and may not have been directly caused by the scheme at all. In other words, that small reduction might just be normal statistical noise, nothing to do with the policy whatsoever. Compare that to the Rwanda scheme, the now abandoned policy that Labour scrapped immediately after winning the election, calling it expensive, unworkable and immoral. Well, according to this same sophisticated modelling, arrivals have risen by 24% more than projected after Labour cancelled the Rwanda policy. 24%. That's nearly 3 times the effect of Labour's one-in, one-out scheme, except in the opposite direction. The Rwanda scheme was actually deterring people from attempting the crossing. Yes, it was expensive. Yes, it was controversial, but it was working as a deterrent, and Labour scrapped it anyway because it didn't fit their political ideology. Now, the Home Office has said it does not recognise the analysis, which is the government's standard response when research contradicts their narrative. They've confirmed that an evaluation of the one-in, one-out scheme is underway, which basically means we don't have evidence it's working yet, but we're hoping to find some eventually. A Home Office spokesman tried to put a positive spin on things, saying their pilot scheme has already resulted in more than 100 illegal migrants with no right to remain in the UK being returned to France. They contrasted this with the Rwanda scheme, which cost taxpayers £700 million and delivered only 4 voluntary returns. On the surface, that sounds like Labour's scheme is more cost-effective. 100 returns versus 4. But here's what the spokesman conveniently left out. Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp absolutely demolished this argument with some simple facts. Since the government's so-called one-in, one-out deal was announced, about 16,000 illegal immigrants have arrived in the UK. 16,000! And how many have been sent back? 100! So the ratio isn't one in, one out at all. It's 160 in, one out. That means illegal channel migrants currently have a 99.5% chance of staying in the UK. Let that sink in for a moment. If you're a migrant considering whether to attempt the dangerous channel crossing, and you know that even if the UK has a policy of returns, your chances of actually being returned are 0.5%, that's not a deterrent. That's effectively a guarantee that you'll be allowed to stay. Chris Philp didn't pull any punches in his criticism. He said Labour made a catastrophic mistake by cancelling the Rwanda removals deterrent just before it started. And numbers crossing have surged since the election. And the data backs him up. The sophisticated modelling shows that scrapping Rwanda led to a 24% increase in arrivals above what was projected. That's thousands of additional migrants who attempted the crossing because they knew the Rwanda threat was gone. Labour owns that increase. They made the decision to scrap the policy and they're now dealing with the consequences. But why has Labour's one-in, one-out scheme been so ineffective? Well, there are several reasons. First, the numbers are completely inadequate. Returning 100 migrants out of 16,000 is not creating any meaningful deterrent effect. People smugglers and migrants know the odds, and they know those odds are overwhelmingly in their favour. Second, the returns are going to France, which is right across the channel. If you get returned to France, you can simply try again next week. It's not like being returned to Rwanda, which is thousands of miles away and creates a genuine barrier to attempting the crossing again. Third, the scheme lacks the kind of high-profile media coverage and political commitment that would be necessary to create a deterrent effect. The Rwanda scheme, whatever its flaws, was constantly in the news. Migrants knew about it. Smugglers knew about it. Everyone knew that if you cross the channel illegally, you might end up in Rwanda. Labour's one-in, one-out scheme? Most migrants probably haven't even heard of it. The comparison to the Albania returns agreement is instructive. That policy led to a 36% reduction in arrivals, which is statistically significant and way more effective than Labour's current scheme. Why? Because it was properly resourced, consistently applied, and created a genuine deterrent effect. Migrants from Albania knew they'd be returned quickly, so fewer attempted the crossing. That's how deterrent policies are supposed to work. Labour's current approach isn't achieving that at all. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. The Rwanda scheme cost £700 million and only achieved 4 voluntary returns before Labour scrapped it. That's an absurdly high cost per return. And Labour is right to point that out. But here's what they're missing. The Rwanda scheme wasn't designed to physically remove thousands of people. It was designed to create a deterrent effect that would prevent people from attempting the crossing in the first place. And according to the modelling, it was actually working. The cost per crossing prevented might have been quite reasonable if the policy had been allowed to continue and scale up. But we'll never know because Labour killed it before it had a chance to prove itself fully. The political implications of this research are enormous. Labour staked their credibility on being able to handle immigration more effectively than the Conservatives. They criticised the Rwanda scheme as cruel and expensive. They promised their approach would be smarter, more humane and more effective, and now we have peer-reviewed scientific evidence suggesting they've made the crisis worse. They scrapped a policy that was working and replaced it with one that's barely having any effect at all. How do they come back from that? How do they explain to voters that channel crossings have surged under their watch? How do they justify scrapping Rwanda when the evidence suggests it was more effective than their current approach? Right, that's the absolutely devastating research showing Labour's immigration policy is failing spectacularly. Thanks so much for watching this breakdown of how Keir Starmer has managed to make the migrant crisis worse, despite promising to fix it. Make sure you're subscribed because this story is going to keep developing as more migrants arrive and Labour scrambles to respond. Until next time, stay informed and we'll see you in the next one.